Katie, I'm so excited for you to join us to ask the questions you've heard people ask about AI. Just you're in the field, you're in an area, let them know where you're located, but really hearing the small business and nonprofit questions that people ask.
Well, thank you, Martin and Justin, for this opportunity. I'm located in Pamlico County, which is a rural county in eastern North Carolina, population of about 13,800. And I'm the Small Business Center director here. And we're kind of on the fringe here as far as embracing AI and understanding the practical applications of it. So questions. The first thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was that if you had to draw a picture or create a visual, and I'm probably asking you something you can't do right now on camera, but of AI and how it works. You've got your digital natives, which are all of our kids running around right now. I'm a digital migrant, right? And you've got people all in between that have various understandings of technology. And so I find sometimes visually to see what AI is and how it works, what would that visual kind of look like? Or how can we conceptualize what AI looks like out there in the world?
So how would I would answer that question is what AI looks like and how I would explain it to someone who is not familiar with it or even comfortable with computers is everyone is comfortable with the human life cycle. We have all grown up. We have all been around learning and education our entire life. So AI is not much different. When you look at how it's structured, it's a lot like a schematic. Many people would think a housing plan is what many seem to think of. But when you look at how it functions and how it behaves, it's not much different from someone experiencing growing up, learning new skills, and becoming an adult. With AI, AGI, which is artificial general intelligence we haven't reached yet, and artificial superintelligence, which we have no idea when to conceive that will happen, is much like a child going into being a teenager and then an adult as far as artificial intelligence is. The more data that it receives, that it's trained on, the more feedback and correction that it receives from users and those who regulate or create it and guide it, the smarter it's going to be, the faster it will be able to recall information, and the better it will be in being used as a tool, which when we have to look at it, it is in fact a tool that we use for productivity and to solve complex calculation.
I'm going to add the version of the AI where it's breaking down text. So we're giving it text and it's breaking it down. Imagine the phrase and sentences we're giving it are then being broken down kind of like the grammar structure systems. It's just to give a metaphor. Remember when you learned grammar and you broke down the sentence with the verbs? Yes. Well, it's doing a different system, but it's breaking it down and working throughout layers of algorithms to be able to decide what is the next word in response to give one word at a time. So imagine, I like the analogy of learning fundamentals of grammar, and imagine a system working through layers of taking that sentence and breaking it through layers and going, okay, this is the next word to respond with. And if you watch like ChatGPT, you'll see how it generates one word at a time. This isn't a parlor game. It's actually generating one word at a time as the next probable word. So imagine a filter, and then often you'll see machine language with the neural nets breaking down, but that's still hard to visualize as a metaphor. That's why we wanted to give you two perspectives on it.
It appears that AI, to kind of a simple person here, it appears in three formats. It can appear in content, visuals, and audio.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
So, and my understanding is that it sounds like it is kind of like say for example, I was doing a search for it's going to access all of the available information that's already out there on the internet, scan it, kind of filter it, to the request that's put in and create content back. That would be the content side, correct?
It's different than that. That's why that was that's the
Mhm.
automatic assumption. No, it's already brought in the data. It's
Right.
already processed the fundamental data, like in ChatGPT. In fact, it's done it at a certain time, going back with available data it has. So imagine it populating and looking for patterns and resources, and all that's been pre-done. Then it
Okay.
gets your sentence and it's got to break it down. And I don't want to use the word to have meaning because it's, of course, not intelligent, but it's sort of like it's now got to figure out what you're asking for from the sentence structure after it's studied all this. Then from there, it goes to its information, which is different than a database. That's why it's so hard to understand.
Hmm.
And it's now going to pull what's the next word in response to generate that's most probable. And that's why this is so complicated. My stepson's a senior data scientist, and he does his best to explain it at the granular level. So really, to get a more accurate description, you're going to have to understand something about advanced mathematics and also other tools of this, the way the software, the neural networks work. And that's a problem because there isn't an easy metaphor to the world. That's why I'll say it's sort of like the way the human brain works. Well, it's just sort of. So it's
Right.
using, imagine, that's why I like the filters, but it's not going out to the internet immediately
Right.
getting, it's going into its own data that's been analyzed and broken into resources and massive amounts, different than a traditional file cabinet. That's why it's so hard for most people to grasp. Then it's going from that, going, okay, based on what my algorithm says this question is, what is the next word to give an
Right.
answer from? And it's going one word at a time. That's why it's so amazing and also difficult to give humans a easy metaphor or graphic to
Okay.
understand it.
And there's two words that I use to really drive this is context and verification. For example, if you think about if you're speaking with someone and it's a topic that's very important and they come up and they whisper something in your ear live and you're asked a question, are you going to use that information straight from the source in that point? Even if they're a subject matter expert, depending on how important the information is and how you want to use it, you're going to verify that information first. And that's kind of what this training data sets that they've been trained, it's data, it's cleaned up, it's verified, and it's going to pull from that rather than just out on the internet. But then at the same time, context. And that's where Martin is talking about one word at a time. It's going to take the context that you provide it. It's going to use keywords, the neural network, how it's designed to find what best fits that context for the input. And that's how it's going to design its output. So, for example, and it may happen at times, if you ask it about the best way to make pie, I doubt you're going to get an answer about why wooden chairs are better than metal chairs. And so context is key, but at the same time, there are, even with ones that are considered live, there are controls in place that regulate how this data is processed.
I want to give an example of one of the first breakthroughs that Google had, where they took a very large neural net and had it analyze thousands and thousands of videos to see if it could identify a pattern. And it came up with a pattern. And then we call that image a cat. It didn't know it was a cat, but it
Mhm.
identified there seems to be something like this here. And that
Right.
was one of the first breakthroughs, that there was enough where it could create a kind of image of a pattern it saw. And then we are giving that label cat. Well, that's so it's a combination of its auto training and then humans interacting with it, verifying and it working back and forth. So it does the self training as well as the interaction with human beings.
And that's where you hear the terms supervised and unsupervised learning.
You hear AI and then you hear ChatGPT and Bing. And I don't think people understand that AI and the tools are different. So there's actual tools that are used to access So talk to me about ChatGPT. People hear it, they have really no idea. Can you talk about what kind of tool it is, what it does, and then of course Bing or any other options that are out there?
And so, a category I think a lot of people can relate to is power tools. A power saw, a drill, it is all under the category of power tools. And Chat GPT, Bing Chat, Predis, these are all tools. They're AI powered. And so artificial intelligence in the grand scheme of things covers the concept of near human or technology using near human intelligence. And so that could be your power tool. Then you have different categories under that. For example, LLM, large language models, are ones such as ChatGPT, Bard, Claude, and they're language based. You're going to be using them a lot with the prompt and, again, trying to get content based on the context and what the best next word is. But then you also have ones where it may be image generation. And so you have tools such as MageSpace and even Canva Designer to where prompts are used, which is language, that's how we communicate, are used to create images. And so you have to look at it as different categories. A lot of people, just because of the marketing and the media coverage that ChatGPT has received, a lot of people think if they can use ChatGPT, they understand artificial intelligence and they understand how all of these tools work. When in fact, they're only using one tool within a subset of a category under artificial intelligence based tools. Does that help clarify that a little?
Yeah. So say for example, I open up my toolbox, my AI toolbox, and I'm reaching for something where a tool that's going to, I want to look for a bunch of academic journal articles that have to do with the efficacy of blue paper masks during COVID.
So one of the other pieces of this is, first of all, we're really at the level of specialized machine learning systems, and artificial intelligence makes it scary and exciting for the media. But what it really is a very specialized machine learning system, and under it there are different power tools. So you don't use a drill when you need a sawzall.
Right,
You don't
right,
use, so you have to first understand their different ones, and then which is the best one to use. And I thought your example of, I want to do some research that also gives me some sources that are current, and ChatGPT would not be the right one for it.
right,
But the Microsoft Bing one would be,
right,
because it does give us some references. So you do have to understand what the different tools are, and then which
right.
ones have a free access, and then which ones are the right one for the problem that you have.
I think where a lot of people are mistaken is with science fiction is, well, why can't my drill do this? And so a lot of people think artificial intelligence, they think of autonomous robots that can carry out the function. And so again, we go back to those three levels. Artificial intelligence essentially is built on machine learning. So it can get pretty good at certain things, but it's still learning. When you reach artificial general intelligence, that's typically where we are. So you can be specialized in maybe one to two things, very specialized, and you can have knowledge and experience with other things. So, for example, your drill gun can also use a bit to screw things in. That's a good example of, we're looking at AGI. And then when you get artificial superintelligence, that's where it's past human understanding on what it's capable of. And that's so you have a tool where you tell it what it wants to do, and a robot actually, will use that as a tool. So your workshop has your tools, but then it has a robot to where you tell it what you want, it does everything and calls you when it's finished. That's when we're looking at artificial superintelligence. And so I think a lot of people fast forward to AI being artificial superintelligence, where I can just dump a prompt in and it's going to understand. It's not, and we go back to context. And so I think that, looking at it as a workshop as a whole, and then your example of the toolbox is probably one of the best that I've found to explain to anybody wading into these waters.
And for example, a Tesla has a built-in computer, obviously, and a certain level of machine language, artificial intelligence working in it. But if it's never had any experience or any training or anything related to how to play chess, you can't just say, please play chess now. If we were at the level of general intelligence, it could then do that.
Right,
And
right,
that's
okay.
that's when we should all get a little bit nervous.
Right.
The
Right.
the risk now is what I call stupid AI, and then general intelligence would be the risk of something more informed. And
Hmm.
the thing that throws people off is it speaks in a pattern that looks like it's an authority that we're comfortable with. So we often give more human
Right.
qualities to it than it really has earned. That's a funny way to say it, but has yet.
Why does a small business owner or a nonprofit organization or me, as someone that assists these organizations, why do I need to care about AI?
So this is very important because most, especially in your rural areas, access to resources and funds are top priority. If you have a small business, that means you have the confidence in you being a subject matter expert to the point that you feel that you can provide the level of expertise that people are going to return, pay you for your product or service.
Mm-hmm.
However, what happens is many times, even though you're a subject matter expert, you find out quickly that you're overwhelmed because you may be a subject matter expert in tobacco chairs and people will drive from all over to buy them or other crafts, but you may not be an expert in operating a business. And you find that the resources needed to operate that business and to get your information out there does not come prepackaged when you start the business. So artificial intelligence, what it does is it provides the ability to learn these skills in a more individualized way because, for example, Bing with the research capability provides the user the ability to learn new skills by communicating back and forth with the tool. Content creation, marketing, website building, image generation. For many small businesses who've never used Canva or done graphic design, they have to outsource to Fiverr or to a local freelancer, which can add up over time. However, AI gives them the ability to understand something as simple as prompt engineering and be able to turn that into image generation and marketing campaigns, which although they may not understand or have the time or the ability to create graphics, once they understand how the tools work, then that expands their ability to do their own marketing campaign. Whether they still outsource the final product, it cuts down on the steps involved and it cuts down on the amount of funds they're having to expend on that project. But then eventually what they're going to find out is the more that they use these tools, the more they become comfortable with them, they're going to learn they're going to be phasing out a lot of this outsourcing and really start to be able to be more self-reliant holistically.
I want to give
So
an
go
example
ahead.
of this specifically is one thing that happens in small businesses is they're so overwhelmed with wearing so many hats,
Mm-hmm.
coming up with ideas for marketing, coming up ideas with content, coming up ideas to do something different is something that they often are just so fatigued they don't have. An example would be Skyview Skateland
Right.
is working with the STEM program and wanted 10 new ways to apply STEM education to roller skating ring. And she put in that sentence. We did this live and she went, oh my gosh, that gave me at least 4 or 5 of them that I hadn't thought of before. That means more money. That's things they can do. And for people who don't know STEM, it's a science education program that's very active in the schools. They often go to field trips where it's like, imagine roller skating, you're spinning around and learning about centrifugal force or something like that. So that's one. Or a popcorn place. They open their doors, they're going, and they just want 10 ideas for videos talking about popcorn related to There's one in Wilson. Let's say whirly gigs, okay, and several other variables give us 10 ideas for videos we could make, and it provides that. That's a huge asset to them, because that just, I'm so overworked, there's no room for a lot of the creative ideas, is a great beginning space. And I'll give one more. Somebody often, I asked one place, and their OMG pimento cheese, where are you stuck on in doing something that you really feel you should be able to do? And she said, we have a 5-year anniversary of being in business, and I need to do a press release. I just keep putting it off. So we grab text from their website, we put in this sentence, take this text and write a press release about being in business for 5 years. And she read it and went, I just need to change 2 or 3 words and put it out there. Can you see how that could save some time? So we try to start with real simple things to begin with. And one is just stuck in getting ideas.
Right.
Right.
And it doesn't stop at that. Another good example, too, is for those in the virtual space. You think they're in the virtual space, they must already understand artificial intelligence because they work remotely or online all day. But for many, say blogs or even marketers, the thought that they may be blocked on content, they can actually take and use something like ChatGPT to use an article they previously created and ask to generate new content, and have the tool analyze their tone, their literary style, and their writing style, and then have it produce new content and new ideas already written in similar style that there, as the subject matter expert, they just have to edit, adjust, add to from there. But as far as generation, that saves them hours many times and keeps them from having to take an article and completely rewrite it in their own voice. So examples like that is huge time savers.
Right. It was interesting. I was starting a new website today for a nonprofit in Wix. And I've been working with Wix for a while. And I got to the kind of template, and you pick the template. And before it went any further, it said, would you like AI to generate, to start writing some of your stuff on your website? I mean, this new window popped up, and I went, okay, so I don't know what I don't know yet about it. And I don't know exactly. So I thought, well, gosh, if I had a tagline or a mission statement, very consult, that would be something I could start building with, right? So, and I also see, I have a local business who has got a very, very high precision machine. It can cut up to 1/4 inch steel so precisely, like feather like precision. And they're looking for, obviously a lot of people like to do a lot of yardscapes and artwork and fire pit screens, but they want to look for mass production. That's where they want their income. And they're brainstorming. This is where I thought, gosh, AI would be great. What are the uses? What are some products that are mass produced or needed for precision metal laser cutting? So besides just like the medical market, for implants and things like that, They're trying to expand their imagination. And it was interesting. My friend of mine just is going to have some surgery here shortly. And she was talking about this pin and this tiny plate that's going to be put in her orbital lobe. And I thought, oh my gosh, like somebody is mass producing those little tiny plates somewhere, right? So, but AI can do that thinking for this business instead of them going and spending all this time exploring these potential markets and potential product lines. That's where AI could be useful, correct?
Correct. And in that specific example, Bing Chat is powerful because where Bing Chat is unique, it operates off ChatGPT 4. So that's the newest version open right now for ChatGPT. But then it's also integrated into Bing's search engine. So not only can it provide new ideas based on prompts for these, but Chat or Bing actually pulls in images as well. So not only is the information going to be there and who may potentially purchase these, market research, but at the same time, it can also pull in images that it may find that someone else is doing outside of the area, or, examples that then for someone who's a kinetic operator, or they learn more by seeing, once they see that may spur even more ideas, or at least give them more of an idea on how it will look, not just trying to discern what the language means.
To Martin's point, one of the biggest challenges that I'm sure, Martin, you've come across are small business owners and our nonprofit operators are operationally bogged down, right? And as a former small business owner, I know that you're knee deep in the day-to-day operations of the customer right in front of you, the challenge right in front of you. And you get to the end of the day and you're supposed to be doing Facebook posts. You're supposed to be having this vision planning or strategic planning going forward for growing your brand or expanding your market, but you're brain dead. It's not your gift, right? The entrepreneurs usually dive into a product centric or a nonprofit, like a heart centric idea. And usually they don't have, they have tools in their toolbox, but marketing and vision plan, that's not. So then now they say, well, I don't have time to do it. I don't have the budget to hire someone who's going to charge me $150 a month to put my website on some weird server somewhere. So then they don't do it. And so I always tell them that there's tools out there. So it sounds like to me, but there's still a barrier to learning. So my question is, are there downloads or softwares that someone like that are going to need in order to access these tools?
For the most part, these tools are, and the free ones, in fact, do have a web presence. So many of them do not require any downloads. For example, Bing is part of the search engine. ChatGPT, Claude, Bard, they're all web-based. When you see a lot of the download is when you get more into the graphic design editing. For example, CapCut is a tool that Martin and I show in our trainings. It's for both video and image editing using AI powered practices. Now that one, it does have a free online platform, but if you want to get the most out of it, it does have a free download for a desktop app. But really, when you're looking at what you're doing, that's one tool you may have to that could handle almost all of your graphic design and video editing, and then everything else is web-based. There are very few tools nowadays that you have to download anything. Many of them can just be bookmarked in a folder and accessed anytime that you need them.
Now, I want to interject one thing there too, Katie, is I'm still an advocate of the first thing to do. We're going to hold it up and see if you can see that. You see that one right there?
Okay.
ChatGPT, make sure you get it from OpenAI, is an app, the free version. I like people downloading it. It's available on Android and iPhone. And when you've got some free time, you're waiting to pick up a kid, or you're, at the doctor's office sitting there and there's a little free time, open the thing and then start asking some questions. And this is a real good just get started. And notice when you phrase things differently, then you get different answers. And part of it is we as humans are very sloppy in our speaking, especially with people we know, because we don't have to explain a lot of information about it for them to understand. So that's where you want to start working with them and trying different instructions and noticing how it gives different results. Because that's the art that takes a little fumbling and working. Of course, Justin and I give real examples and start training people on it. And
I do want to share one thing too, and your toolbox example was so good because many things come with instructions nowadays. But if you go and you pick a hammer off of the wall, a hammer does not come in a box with a manual.
Right.
And you would be surprised that there are a lot of people who even admit they're not sure exactly how a hammer works, and that there are 4 or 5 different types of hammers at that.
Right.
And
Right.
so the good thing about this tool is this tool will teach you how to use it. And like Martin said, by playing with it, you can even type in there, I am new to this. I don't understand what prompt engineering is. Can you teach me? And it will start teaching you. And if you're still lost, you can even ask it, I have an X problem and I need X solution. Can you provide me a way to communicate with you that will allow me to access this? And it will start providing you prompts that you can copy and paste back into it. And so a good example for a new learner, again, is Bing, because of the fact that it's powered by ChatGPT 4 and it's integrated into the search engine, which we're so familiar with, especially my generation, and using Googling something or Binging something. And so for your question about tools, Bing is very powerful because you can say, I need a tool for graphic design that does not require a download. It's free and it's user friendly because I am learning. And it'll provide you more information. It'll give you choices. And then you can even ask it which of these has the highest ratings. And so it will actually help you narrow down which one to use. And then from there, you click on a link and you can get started.
There's a phrase that you use that you've normalized as being mainstream, but was brand new to me 2 weeks ago, and that's called prompt engineering. Now, it makes sense if I apply this to my general knowledge of Googling, which has now become a verb, that, sometimes I'll Google something and it's not, I'm like, well, wait a second, I wanted corduroys, right? And I'll get corduroys, but they're not for men. So I go back in,
Right.
I go, okay, men's corduroys. I'm like, oh no, wait, I want the wide leg. Okay, wide leg men's corduroys, lightweight, right? So we already know how to to generate a more specific and desirable result. That's the concept of prompt engineering, correct?
In a way. So with the search engine, it operates more off of keywords. Now, the input is similar, and there's a reason they've designed these things to mimic the search engines because we're so comfortable with them. And so your corduroy example is spot on, because if you type in men's corduroy, it's going to search for web pages that may be selling or providing information with the word men's and the word corduroys. And so the more you give context, it's the more keywords that it's providing. Whereas when you get into language models like ChatGPT, Claude, and Bing, it's more about the context. It's still going to be identifying specific words, but the prompt engineering is creating prompts, which is prompting it to do something. It's an input, is creating a prompt that provides the appropriate and the necessary context so that when it pulls from its data set, it has more information to take off. So it's communicating with it. An example I like to give, and Martin has a really good definition. An example I like to give is you look at the AI tool as a genie. If you say, I want to fly, and it makes you a duck, you can't get angry at the tool. But if you say, give it more, I'd like to have wings so that I can fly, then it's going to give you a much better response. And so essentially, prompt engineering is a term that just communicating effectively with the tool with inputs.
And this varies based on the platform, but the basic skills are similar. The other thing is I want to give it from a corporate training, large level system of businesses hiring a prompt engineer. What it is if we were a law firm and we wanted to start getting answers and tools that would help us, traditionally we'd have to do all the work of feeding all the data into it and have all the processors and everything else. But these large language systems have already collected as much data as it can in the world, and now we're using prompts to narrow it down to act like a customized system just for us. So that's at the higher level. That's
Okay.
where a company is able to save massive amounts of money by using a large language system that's done huge amounts of data and analyzed it, and then giving it prompts so it almost looks like this is a customized version just for them. And this is where I just talked to someone who heard of a law firm that had 32 assistants working in the law firm, built an AI system, and worked with a large language. Now, they paid for this. This wasn't a free
Right.
one. And they whittled down to 2 people helping the attorney.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so say, for example, your law firm and you go to your clerks and you say, research all the precedents about lawsuits that have won against pet owners that have neighbors with barking dogs. Well, so your clerks go to work, right? And they're going to, while that just looking at precedents, they're going to access maybe local, state precedents. I mean, where your AI is going to probably go all over the world and look at precedents with noise related complaints with animals, right? Yeah, I can totally see that. But on the on the microcosm level, how does that look for a small business?
Well, a small business, I like the analogy, Justin, we have is Google is like a vending machine. You know, there's some basic things in there. You select the exact one and you get an option. Or it's like a vending machine where you ask it for a bunch of options of the best or an example of a dark chocolate candy bar, and it gives you a list, but you have to sort through that list and decide which is better. While ChatGPT is more like I've got a chef that's not, it's extremely knowledgeable. It knows how to cook, but it needs very clear instructions. So if I say I want pancakes with Southern tea and I'm not specific, it may make a fantastic pancake mixed in with tea in the pancake. So I
Right.
probably need to say I want Southern tea with a nice glass of I want pancakes. I want
Right.
pancakes with a nice glass of Southern tea separate. You see, that would
Yeah.
be where you learn from. The first prompt gave me great pancakes, but they taste like Southern tea. Well, that's because your prompt wasn't clear enough. So one of the analogies my stepson gives is, it's sort of like it's like a parrot that has all the knowledge of the world in its head and it's learned how to give responses that sound like it's self-aware, but it's really just a process it's using of its
Yeah.
brain to
Okay.
give an answer.
And so how this
And it's useful because having a parrot that knows all the knowledge in the world is pretty useful if you ask the right question.
And so how this looks for a small business example that I really like to give is market research. So if you have a small business that may be established in their community and in their market already, but they want to expand, if they're expanding into, maybe they see the opportunity that no one's meeting in a market locally, but they have no understanding of that market or the product or services, they can use these tools for market research. So if they were to go to an advisor and it may be something cutting edge and that advisor is not aware of it either, then the amount of research that's going to have to be done on that,
Right.
and it may not even be correct research if it's cutting edge, but doing market research, not only are you going to get a much faster response and more data, but you're going to get more specific information back to you. And again, I use different tools for different things, but we just keep coming back to some of the capabilities of Bing, where with market research, it'll bring back information, but where it does a much better job than other tools is it provides sources and citations. So if you're looking for grant funding or private foundations, and you may have even heard of a foundation given funding for this type of product, then when you search it, if you have a good prompt, it's going to return back information, and it's going to also provide you the links. You don't have to look in the white pages anymore or Google things and hope that it shows up on the 15th page. If it's not on the first, it's going to provide you links and take you directly to those resources. So that's going to expedite your access to resources. But then depending on which, there are most paid levels to every free level. Depending on what version of the platform you're using, it can also go even further in helping you design financial plans, design strategies, and just design even, say war games, strategic planning on how to enter the new market. And so for a small business owner, it goes without explanation of how powerful of a tool that is for them.
I am a small business center director, and somebody that's tasked with helping businesses grow or start or whatever. And I know that the tools of AI are going to be something that are going to be mainstream fairly soon. And I want to get my people up to date, regardless of what their toolbox looks like,
Mm-hmm.
or what their skills look like, and even opening that toolbox. So now this is, so two things I wanted to ask. First of all, there are some colleges that are not willing to embrace the use of AI at all. And I don't think maybe they have an understanding that you can still employ the use of the tools at an operational level without endangering a college network, for example, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You're not, I can use AI here on, like you say, web-based, without downloading anything onto the network. That was the first thing. And the second thing, for small business center directors statewide that are looking at, okay, I've ignored this long enough. I don't like not knowing what I don't know. And most small business center directors like to offer content that they're comfortable with. And
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're not all comfortable with this. So I would envision that a great first course is, going with your metaphor, let's open the toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the toolbox. Let's open it and see what tools are in there that you feel comfortable using. That would be like, kind of, as you said, Justin, your metaphor was like, let's just turn the light on in the room and talk about the general. And then the next phase, that's going to be enough. That's going to be saturating for some people, just getting their head around. I remember my father-in-law living with me, and he just could not get his head around digital, like 0, 1, like
Mm-hmm.
numbers. Like, he couldn't get his head around the internet, that cable in the wall he's never going to get it. But there's some people that are still, they want to get it, but the first class is just going to be mind blowing. The second one I would envision is, now let's pick up these tools, figure out which ones are best for your business, and play around with a few of them that you feel comfortable with. Is that about right?
Yeah, and one of the things we first, when we're working with someone, want to find out is what eats up a lot of their time, because
Okay.
that's where and I'll give one very specific example. One person I met has to do a review of their, let's say, exchange students every single week. Imagine you have to do a review and you have to create a new report, and almost nothing changes. So that's where they could use a tool like ChatGPT, is say, take this report and then interject this change that occurred in this report and write it for me. And then that one change is done. They skim through to make sure that it's coherent
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't say something like, he could fly like a butterfly or something weird's in there. We call those hallucinations. And now something that would have taken them a tedious task, a half an hour to an hour of their time each week going through this, could all be done in, let's say, a few minutes. So, what we have to first find is, where do they get stuck? Where are the issues? That's why when we did the free presentation for the directors, we said, tell us what your questions are. Well, some you have to see it enough, and our first introduction was just showing them a gee whiz of what's going on to even know you could ask a question.
I think that demo component is very important, because I don't think they know what they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. So they don't recognize that, like, they don't understand how to employ it, or what the capabilities are. So when you say, well, what bogs you down the most or whatever, I think that showing the real world examples of daily tasks that can be conquered in fraction of the time, that's going to be where people are going to see the ROI, right? Because everyone wants to say, what's my ROI on that?
Right. And so a good example of that is it's genuinely counseling in a way, is someone who's afraid of elevators. So how a counselor or a therapist may work with somebody who has a fear of elevators is, let's start by talking about an elevator. You know, after you're more comfortable with that, let's look at the elevator, maybe touch the elevator, and eventually you're in the elevator. And then after that, you're riding the elevator. And that's how I find a lot of individuals who are really unsure about that. They might not even be comfortable with computers yet, and now they feel they have to catch up even more
Yeah.
so. And so when you're talking about the professional side and with the colleges, a lot of it is, I think, you don't know what you don't know, because when you look at we say a lot of Chat, GPT, Claude, really it goes back to NVIDIA, Google, and Microsoft. ChatGPT, OpenAI, is tightly affiliated with Microsoft because of funding and being a startup. Google has Bard, but then also is affiliated with Anthropic. And so it always comes back to two or three big companies. So when you look at community colleges, county schools, and things like that, the two platforms that are typically operated on are Google Classroom and Microsoft, especially the 365. And so what a lot of people don't realize is with Bing Chat, everybody can access Bing Chat with a free Outlook account. But when you look at a school Office 365, enterprise account, you have Bing Chat Enterprise. So you actually have access to a much more powerful version of it. And with Google Classroom, the free account has access to Google Labs, which is their kind of version of Microsoft Copilot in assisting you with your tasks via AI. And then when you get into Google Classroom, again, you're at a much higher paid version, so you're going to have much access to much more powerful tools. And so in many ways, even colleges I've found that may have turn off the access or turn off the lights, they don't realize that ingrained in their platform that they use daily, Outlook or Gmail, there are AI tools already integrated within the platform that they can access. Martin gave a great example of how to use it for daily reports. What I have used and I've taught other people to use is when you use the online version of Word, you have a dictation and transcription item in there. So you can upload a recording of a video, have it transcribe that for you, and then you can go over to something like Claude, ChatGPT, or Bing and have it actually turn that transcription into an organized meeting minutes document. And so then all you have to do is go back through, make sure the formatting is correct and that the information is listed how it was in the meeting. But you think about how many people dread just taking meeting minutes. And so for what Martin talked about is where they're bogged down, what we challenge people to do is throughout your day, and it could just be how you feel throughout your day, the tasks that you dread, write them down and reflect to see if those tasks that you dreaded are things that are mundane or tedious or take up too much time. And then let's explore how, if there's a free tool or a tool that you may already have access through your employer that you can use to streamline or drastically reduce the time and effort it takes to satisfy that. And it's, again, like turning the lights on in their mind when they see that it doesn't have to be this way.
Perfect. Just, it's funny, this nonprofit that I'm helping to start up right now, I'm the secretary, and perfect examples. We have Zoom meetings, we record them. They send me the recordings and I put it off the very last minute, converting those into minutes. I have a template in Word that I like, but just that 60, 75 minutes of listening and plugging it in. And it's not hard, but I dread it and I put it off until like 24 hours prior. And they're like, we didn't have a chance to review the minutes before the meeting. I'm like, I'm sorry. So I can see already an application where you're saying I could take that Zoom, the MP4 recording, and I could cross-reference it with that maybe template that I have in Word for my minutes.
Right.
And it will plug and play that in based on I guess you'd probably have to have a little bit of content-driven direction in the template, right? Like
Right.
attendance, meeting came to order, things like that. So
Not
it
even
plugs
that.
it in.
Now, it
Okay.
will do that. And then what
Mhm.
happens is you use your knowledge to skim through it and go,
Mhm.
oh, that's a little bit off. That's not, you see,
Mhm.
we still want that filter of the human being to cross
Right.
check it. I wouldn't just put out
Okay.
blindly. And that's why, for example, in the small business director's introduction we did, we really wanted to just showcase like a sample, like a buffet. These are a few cool things it can do so that it
Yeah.
would stir the mind to go, oh, well, now I have a question. And
Okay.
that's what we did in that training program is showcase. One of the ones I love that Justin did is people go wiggy when it comes to a ledger sheet. And he gave an example of just give us a basic example of a coffee shop tracking some data. And then once you see that, if you're a coffee shop, you go, oh, I can change those variables and see what happens. And then he showed how to get a formula. If you didn't even know how to do a formula, how to generate that and plug it in. So
Mhm.
the first beginning, like you said, in training is often just showing several real world examples.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they even know to ask the question. And I think that's what you want to get because you can spend lots of time learning how neural networks, and I spent a lot of time understanding it. It's sort of like, first learn how to turn on the lights, then understand how electricity works. And a lot of people go to, I need to understand all of how electricity. Well, there are fuses and there's current and there's ground and there's floating ground and there's the hot, and I understand those. But really, let's first try. Oh, I can turn on the light and get this to occur. Oh, there's something called a
Yeah.
dimmer that changes this. Oh, I didn't even know that there are light bulbs that can be like sunlight. That's where we try to start is introduce them to some tools so they even know what questions to ask.
And to go
Yeah.
off of Martin's example, which is perfect, it's taking many things like graphic design is a good one. Whereas used to graphic design required someone specialized to cut the cord, ground it, know how to rewire it, and make sure that it was wired correctly. To where now graphic design is plug it in and turn it on.
Okay.
To an extent, I don't want to discount anybody who's specialized in graphic, but at the very basic level, it's plug it in and turn it on.
I want to talk about safety a little bit because I don't know
Yeah.
that we brought that up. And there's a lot we cover in our training, but specifically, for example,
Talk
I'll
about
give an
that.
example of something not to do. Okay. And,
Okay.
and it would be like, I sell popcorn and I want it to have a image where Mickey Mouse is excited about our popcorn. That's not
Okay.
a good idea. That's brand stealing. So you still have to apply good judgment to these systems. But what happens is when people go to new systems, they often lose the common sense they have in other contexts. And that's what I've learned teaching over these years is you have to say, don't do this. And another thing is like in
Oh,
ChatGPT is just make sure to understand if it doesn't have enough data, it's going to give you something back with an amazing sense of authority that may not be accurate, but sounds great. So you still want that. You need to know the different platforms, often referred to in ChatGPT. The technical term is temperature, but people often call them hallucinations. So you still, like, even when you do those reports, you still want to skim through and go, that makes sense. We're good. That makes sense. So these are a few things to start with. And the other thing is understanding what Google says. We talk about in SEO. Google's really the big broad stroke is if it's the right content to serve the right customer that they want, we're okay how it's made. Our advice is make it your own, humanize and personalize, and let it tweak naturally so it's really a base to build off of. You don't want to do any of these where you grab it and throw it out the door and don't screen it. Does that make sense? So those are
yeah.
just some
Yeah.
very high level safety tips.
And at the same
Okay.
time, when it comes to data, it's very similar. I get questions sometimes about data analysis. And the thing is, what you put in is going to become part of what it's trained on. So you're feeding it as much as you're withdrawing. So you're making deposits and you're withdrawing. And
Okay.
so if you
Which
want
makes
data
sense.
analysis, it's probably best to take the raw data, take any label or identifier off of it. And if you want it to analyze it, use that. But I wouldn't put your routing number and your social security number in there and just copy and paste off your bank
Right.
website if
That
you
makes
wanted
sense.
to do analysis on your different holdings. And then at the same time, you want to make sure that if you have proprietary information, if you're Iron Man in the cave and you're making cutting edge technology, you don't want to put pictures of how to do it all over the internet. So if you have
Right.
something that's truly cutting edge and you have it under secure systems just so no one gets a peek at it, you probably don't want to dump everything into ChatGPT, because then it's going to resurface somewhere
Yeah.
as data in the training set.
And that happened with Samsung. They
Right.
they had somebody putting early work, I'm just going to generalize in, and then somebody else asked questions and it knew the answer based on something it should not have known because it
Right.
shouldn't have been leaked out. So that
Gotcha.
we make sure to include those safety tips as education. So that's why I like, Justin, just start with like questions, really what would it take for me to get to the moon, or just some general questions. But I wouldn't put in, here's my social security, here's my number, all this data, give me an analysis of what type of person you think I am. That would not be a good idea.
Yeah.
And I've
that
told
makes
people
sense.
if they're nervous about it, let it know. You can even put in something of, this is my first time using a tool such as this. It scares me. What can I do to be safe in using this tool? And it's going to tell you how to be safe using it. Now,
Oh, that's interesting.
again, you always want to do a gut check. If something doesn't smell right, you probably don't want to eat it. So it's the same thing with these tools. If it gives you something and it sounds like in this authority, if you know for a fact it doesn't sound right, verify. You can trust it if you want, but always verify it.
So the verification, and we can talk more about this, but the verification, sorry, I'm a little bit pessimistic on fact checkers these days. So to me, I hear verification and I hear fact checking, and we all know that fact checkers are not fact checkers. So the verification, where does it, how do you know the verification is valid data?
Well, that's where you really want to have, if you're going into a field where you have no subject matter experts at all, then you should be more and more cautious, at all. Where you don't even know if it's right or wrong, you should definitely move slower on this, because there are clear bias built into different platforms. I just got one where there was an interview with old Elon talking about bias, and of course he's polarized too, but he was giving specific examples. He goes, look, this was developed in California and it has a clear verification. So you do still need judgment, and it's good to have people that you can work with for verifying. But if you're a coffee shop and you had to calculate some stuff, you'd have an idea,
Gotcha.
oh, that's not even close. That's not it. And so
Gotcha.
that's why this isn't, AI is amazing, but this isn't something where you just blindly jump in and you expect perfect results automatically. There is a learning, but the payoff's tremendous. Even with the simple press release where they've been carrying it around, they could do it in 5 minutes, and then this was done. A lot of those real simple tasks are a good place to start.
This gives me a very good idea of, and I know that you are packaging seminars now together, like 101, which really is like 001, turning the lights on. And then you're doing the step up. So, okay, what is it? Do you even know that you need it? We'll show, and then let's employ a few tools. And then you also offer some one-on-one. I know, Justin, you've offered to come down and work like hands-on with a nonprofit, because they have very specific needs. Like certain nonprofits are going after certain funding in a certain sector. Some are looking at federal and state. Some are looking for private foundation, or so that's also available as well. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Katie, I want to talk a little bit about our approach and why I teamed up with Dr. Justin Rose. Our approach, the optimum of our approach is being in person with people. That's the optimum, because what was core in working with Justin is that he understood we must speak to the people where they are specifically. Then the next level is like over Zoom. And then the next level, which is hardest, is a webinar, because it's easy for people to hide out and not give us enough data of where they are to be able to customize what we're saying to them. So that's our first preference, is if we can in person. In fact, we did one in Washington, North Carolina, at the school where Justin's out of, and we really were able to dial in. We had some people that had very high level expertise and absolutely no knowledge. And the way I describe it is, we build in our heads a bell curve and say, okay, we can, with these extremes, cover these people. But sometimes in the class, I'll go, we're going to have to talk about that outside the class, because 2/3 of the people are over here on the bell curve and you're way over here, and that's outside the scope. So I always like to be upfront with that.
Well, and that's like, when you get a crowd of people, your people that are hard of hearing never raise their hand. They're embarrassed, right? They've got the hearing aid in and they'll stand in the back, and then they'll never say, I can't hear you, but they're not getting what you're saying. So I'm a big proponent, especially with this content, being able to really kind of demonstrate it in real time based on the needs of their participants. I think a face-to-face is definitely the best way to go.
Let me just end with one beautiful example we had, because I just loved it. This woman writes blogs about wonderful restored buildings in her town. And she knew she needed to write an article about what, let's say, I don't know. Do you remember what the topic was? Elizabethan, or I don't know.
Elizabethan awnings and
architecture. Oh, say that again, Justin, because I botched it.
And my accent may irk some,
right.
but Elizabethan
architecture. So we took a sample of her work, put it in, and said, write an article on this topic. My gosh, I thought she was going to tear up. I was like, well, are you okay? And she said, basically, she goes, that's written in my voice better than I can write.
That's great.
Now, would I recommend she put it out there blindly? No. I recommend go through and see if there's something else, so humanize and personalize it to you. You might add another fact. Don't just throw this out there. But can you imagine the time saving for this person? They got stuck on something. It got something. They know the field enough to know if it made it up. And they went, this is incredible. And I love that phrase, written in my voice better than I can write. That's a great tool, because you know what? She'll become a better writer by reading that content. So that's where I'd like to leave it. And that's our goal, is really enhancing the quality of life. And this is the time to grab it, because just like social media, it used to be social media put out there, people would find. Now it's pay to play. That's why I teach those things secondary and not Facebook is the first thing. This is the time to understand it and to use it for small business, because this window may not always be around. You got to capitalize it. Then when they start charging, you've already used them. You go, okay, that's worth $20 a month to me. That's the one I need to invest in. But if you don't engage at all, you're going to lose that fierce competitive advantage it has to offer. Katie, I want to thank you. You did a great job in asking, the questions you feel, because you're on the ground, you're meeting the people, where they're stuck, that you feel that they might ask. And that's what we wanted to do. This is so much easier, because if we sit down and just give us a beginning thing, we both do better with real world examples and then be able to make sure we answer them. So thanks so much for doing this. Please tell them how they can learn about you and the small business.
Oh, well, I was just going to, the Small Business Center, I'm out in Pamlico County, so they can always go to pamlicosbc.com. So that's our URL there. They can see our seminars and, request individual counseling with me. But I'm one of 58 small business centers across the state. So just look at your local community college. They have a small business center. They have somebody, same role, usually an administrative person as well. And if I can't find the answer, I will find you a consultant or in an industry professional that specializes, that will be able to help you, and the SBC can support you in that. So, but I'm excited to have you. I'm looking at January dates, I think, right now. So for you too.
Excellent. Contact us, and then we'll have links for you, the Maine Small Business Center, and then, of course, Justin and I as well.